all of the major nuclear nations have got the neutron bomb, and they actually made the neutron bomb, and they've got them stockpiled. Okay, and in the 80s they were going to place them in Europe. Reagan was going to place neutron bombs in Europe, neutron missiles in Europe, but the Europeans said no. The bomb was invented by an Israeli guy, a Jewish guy called Sam Cohen, in I think 1980s, 1971, 1981, around about then. But the idea of the thing emerged long before that. The point about a fission bomb, the point about what we know about nuclear weapons, and this is a nuclear weapon, incidentally, is that you originally get the fission bomb. That's like they dropped on Hiroshima. And then they decided to make a hydrogen bomb or a fusion bomb, because you get much more energy out of fusion than you do out of fission. And fusion uses a fission of uranium to produce an enormous amount of heat. And then what they do is they put in tritium and deuterium, which is heavy hydrogen and very heavy hydrogen, H2 and H3, as a lithium salt. And then under the influence of all that temperature, these things fuse together to form helium, and they give off a neutron. And this is a very high energy neutron, 14 million electron volts. And neutrons are normally in the hydrogen bomb, in the thermonuclear bomb, the ones they've got now, those ones, they encase them in uranium, in depleted uranium. So they make this all happen inside a sort of sphere of depleted uranium. And the depleted uranium reflects all the neutrons back. And also the temperature and the energy is so great that the depleted uranium itself goes off, bang. So it all goes off. So it makes an enormous bang. But what this guy Cohen figured out, or various people figured out at Lawrence Livermore, was that you can, if you don't encase them, what you get is you get a lot of neutrons below a certain kilotonnage. So if you make a very small bomb, and this is the key, because if it's a big bomb, the fission fusion effect is so great that the neutrons don't have as much of a relative effect. But if you make a small bomb, just a kilogram or so, no, a kiloton, that sort of size, then the neutrons predominate in terms of exposure. So those neutrons fly out and they kill people, but they don't destroy material, because neutrons are neutral and they go through concrete and they go through iron, they go through walls, so anybody there will be instantly killed from the neutron flux, although the buildings will not be damaged. And in 1969, this guy Cohen made a nuisance of himself trying to get them to use neutron bombs in Vietnam, because he said it would save a lot of lives, because what it would do is just kill the Vietnamese and not destroy the property. You know, it's a sort of what the Russians call, what Yeltsin called a capitalist bomb. So in other words, it just killed people, but all of the buildings remained there. So this thing's been around a long time. The French had it. Cohen moved the Rand Corporation that he worked for when he developed this thing. They kicked him out because he was giving them a lot of trouble over this Vietnam stuff. So they sent him off to.
It sounds to me as if it's because he was talking a bit too much publicly about it. He should have been keeping that under his hat.
Well, yes, it could be all sorts of reasons. Anyway, he went to Paris and then he got in with the French, and so he told them how to make a neutron bomb. So they made a neutron bomb. So they've got it. And then later on, when Reagan became president, he called Cohen to come back and develop the neutron bomb for America. So they developed loads of neutron bombs there, and they had neutron shells, neutron rockets, neutron missiles, you name it. And the question is, did they use them? And certainly the Israelis have got it. I mean, if you look on the internet, in the Times in 1990 something or another. Or maybe it was 2000. The Times of England had a big article about the Israeli neutron bomb, which was developed with the South Africans, and they tested it off southern end of South Africa. So they've got the neutron bomb. And the question is, have they used it? Everybody's got the neutron bomb. Don't worry about it. It's like a sort of complete secret, or else it's just been forgotten by people that these neutron bombs exist. They're very small. That's the point. It's a low yield bomb in terms of it's like bang. It's not like a nuclear weapon. It's not like Hiroshima. It doesn't leave you with a kind of disastrous pile of rubble. It just kills people. And so how would you know if anyone used it? That's the point. How would you possibly know? Because all it does, it produces neutrons, and it produces what's called activation products. So if you fire neutrons at the ground, you get what's called activation products. So it's a whole range of very short-lived, weird nuclides, things that don't last very long, but they produce gamma radiation. So how would you know if someone had used a neutron bomb? Well, there are two things. So first of all, they produce enormous amounts of genetic damage. The neutrons have a relative biological effect of up to 100 times. So if you take a gamma ray dose of 1, the neutron dose at the same energy would be 100 times. So you'd have an enormous amount of genetic damage from the use of a neutron bomb. But you wouldn't have much destruction of property. You get a lot of heat from it, so you'd get a flash that would burn people and burn vehicles and so on, so there'd be a lot of heat involved. But the blast isn't very great, so it wouldn't knock buildings down or anything like that. So the way to look for it, is to look for the neutron activation products. And of course,
and also obviously for the genetic damage. But you're straying quite close to this whole area of particles and energy. This is a neutron. What's a gamma ray? What's an alpha? What a beta? What are these? Are they particles? Are they tiny little bits of atoms, or are they actually just high energy electromagnetic waves?
Well, it's generally this is something that can be argued in all sorts of directions. I mean, any moving particle could be considered to be a wave. This was an idea developed in the 1920s by Louis de Broglie, and so particles have a wavelength, and that's something else that I work on, but we won't go into that. It's a bit complicated, or it'll take a while to explain it, maybe some other time.
Yeah.
But most people will agree that a neutron is a particle. I mean, it has wave properties as well, but they will also so you can get neutron diffraction, for instance.
And you seem to be sort of saying this stuff will go through concrete, but then when it hits a person, it will be absorbed by the person and cause damage.
It's not like a charged particle because it's got a zero charge. So what it does, it's quite different from gamma radiation and from alpha particles and so on. And electrons. So gamma radiation, when it hits you, it causes the ejection of electrons from atoms or molecules, and those electrons are what cause the problem. So the electrons are charged particles and they whiz about the place, and as they bounce off things, they ionize them, and then you get all these ions, and the ions recombine and break things and so forth. So that's where all of the gamma radiation and the beta particles from internal radiation that are beta decay nuclides, for example strontium-90, they all produce the same thing. They produce electrons. So the electrons whiz about inside you like a sort of bullet bouncing off things and causing ionization. And so that's what happens both with photon radiation, like light, which is like gamma rays and X-rays, and also it as a result of them, you get these electrons, and you also get electrons that get are part of a decay scheme for substances which are called beta emitters. Okay. Put that to one side. What neutrons do is they don't work like that at all. Because they're neutral, they don't really interact with molecules in the same way. They don't knock electrons out. What they do is they hit them, and they're more likely to hit things where there are a lot of them. So they hit low. They sort of like billiard balls, and they punch their way into hydrogen atoms and low atomic number elements, sodium and beryllium and boron and those ones in the first period of the atomic. So they're absorbed by all of those things. And when those things fly about, they produce a lot of energy, and they bounce off things, and they cause a lot of heat and so on. And so what they do is they do ionization in a different way. But the way in which they do it is very, very much more powerful than the gamma rays in terms of their energy. So they have an ability to ionize tissue as a result of direct interaction. So they're absorbed by hydrogen. So you can absorb neutrons with paraffin wax, for example, which has got lots and lots of hydrogens in it. And you can absorb it with boron. They use boron as a neutron absorber in nuclear reactors in order to slow the reactor. So they have these control rods that go up and down. They're made of boron. So they control the neutron flux inside the reactor. Anyway, to come back to the point of how would we know if they were using it, the answer is simple. You would expect to see enriched uranium, because what happens is uranium contains U238 and U235, but also U234, because when they extract the uranium, the enriched component, you know, the U235 from the 238 from the mix, obviously they're going to take out the lighter material, and 234 is even lighter than 235. So there's a fair bit of U234 around, and when you hit that with a neutron, you knock it up to U235. Neutron will add an atomic number to it, so it goes up to U235. And according to my colleague, who is dead now, a chap called Emilio Dell Guidice, who's a very famous Italian physicist who visited me in London shortly after I wrote that paper finding enriched uranium in Lebanon. And he came to see me to talk about this. And he said that what happens is that the uranium-238 gets kicked up to uranium-239. And that's a metastable, he said, I don't know, I'm not a nuclear physicist, but he said that's a metastable state of U239 that drops back to U235 with the emission of an alpha particle. But what I do know from what else I've studied is that U239 goes to plutonium-239. So you would expect to find a little bit of plutonium in the mix as well as the enriched uranium. And in fact, indeed you do, because when I was on the Depleted Uranium Oversight Board, they reported, the Swiss who'd been measuring depleted uranium bullets said that they contained small amounts of plutonium-239, or not bullets, but the residue from the use of the bullets. So it's a very interesting area. But the most interesting part of it is that although I first discovered this enriched uranium in Lebanon and later in Gaza, they smuggled out, the Egyptians smuggled out some samples for me to measure. And I've written 2 papers on this, on the Lebanon one and on the Gaza one. And in 2017, in 2021, this is it. So a few years ago, there was a study in Nature. Nature is a very posh journal, of materials, of the gamma radiation measurements of materials in Gaza by three here it is. It's called Radiological Hazard Assessments of Radionuclides in Building Materials, Soils and Sands from the Gaza Strip and North Sinai Peninsula. And this is in Nature, and it's the main author is El Qada. This is an Egyptian woman, Mona M. Abd El Qada. And then there was a Japanese one, Taeko Shinonaga, and another Arab, Mohammed Sharif. And so they measured lots and lots of samples from Gaza to see what was in them. And what they found was that most of the samples had much more enriched uranium. I don't mean much more enriched uranium. I mean enriched uranium that was much more enriched than the stuff that I found in 2009. So I found enrichment ratios which are about, well, normally it's 138 is the normal ratio of U238 to 235 in the environment if you dig some uranium out of the ground. 137.88 is the ratio. And this is the ratio that we used on the Depleted Uranium Oversight Board when we were measuring uranium in the soldiers who were concerned about DU. So that's 137.88 is normal, but what I found when I did the Gaza samples that were smuggled out to me through the tunnels in 2012, I found 112. So this is slightly enriched, 112, 137.88 down to 112. But these guys, in their paper in 2021, found 12.9. Now that's horrifyingly enriched, and they found it in all of the samples. That they found it in soil of Gaza, sand of Gaza, and they found it in, where we got here, recycled plaster and recycled concrete. because they have to recycle all their building materials in Gaza because the Israelis won't let them have any building materials, so they recycle them. So pretty much all of the materials.
That this is naturally occurring stuff?
Totally impossible. Absolutely 1,000,000,000% impossible. All over the world, uranium, the ratios which come down through evolution, from the beginning of the planet, have this signature 137.88. If they don't have that, then they come from a nuclear reactor or from some other man-made scheme.
I mean, is there any clinical evidence of its use?
Yes, of course there is. There's a whole series of papers by that awful woman Manduka. I shouldn't say that, should I? By Paola Manduka, who I worked with sort of long ago. She came to talk to me about Fallujah. And she doesn't really believe that uranium is the cause. She's very woolly about whether uranium is the cause, and it could be because someone got to her and said, you can do all this stuff, but don't mention uranium. It's the elephant in the room. But she has measured uranium in all sorts of samples, and about 5 or 6 papers that she's written since 2014, mostly about congenital malformations in Gaza. So she's managed to get a load of money together to study congenital malformations in Gaza, and she blames all the pediatric outcomes on exposure to heavy metals, of which uranium is one, but she hasn't focused on the uranium. She's focused on barium, arsenic, cobalt, chromium, mercury, molybdenum, selenium, strontium, titanium, vanadium, and uranium. And of course, anyone who has the slightest understanding of genetics will tell you that none of those things, barium and arsenic and cadmium and all that, are a big deal when it comes to genetic damage, the sort of genetic damage that would cause the effects that she has measured, that she has seen. So there are 2 things. First of all, there's the enriched uranium, which I say is a neutron weapon. And there's Manduka's various papers since 2014 about the effects, and the effects are there.
So you reckon she's been got at?
Yeah, I know she's been got at.
It's not that difficult to get at people, is it? You just phone them up and you say, well, if you carry on like this, you're not going to get any funding or worse.
Well, I think it's worse than that. I think when we did Fallujah, she wanted to get hold of the samples, the hair samples that we got from the doctor Samira. And by that time, it was clear to me that there was all sorts of switching going on with the samples because we measured the same sample. So I said to Samira, send her the sample and send me the sample as well, but just with a different code number. And so we got split samples, and the results she got for the samples were not the same as the ones we got for the samples when it came to uranium. So I know that she was got at. Now, whether later on she wasn't or whatever, who knows? And I'm not interested in too much in what she measured. What I am interested in is the fact that she detected she wrote a lot about the levels of congenital malformation that were occurring in Gaza.
Okay, so where has it come from?
Well, here's the point. It comes from a neutron bomb. That's what I now believe. So what I'm saying is that the Americans and the Israelis and now probably the Saudi Arabia people in Qatar, in Yemen rather, are using uranium neutron bombs.
Why do you say uranium?
They're made of uranium. This is how you make bombs.
The obvious question here, Chris, is surely that this is detectable if these things are used.
Yes, of course it is. It's detectable, but nobody detects it. Nobody goes and looks. After the Iraq War in 2003, the Americans refused to allow the International Atomic Energy Agency into Iraq for 6 months. I mean, that was very, very questionable because you remember that the US went to war against Iraq on the basis that they had nuclear weapons, that they had weapons of mass destruction. So you would have thought that they'd let the IAEA in to do some measurements to see if they did have weapons of mass destruction. But no, they excluded them. They wouldn't let them in with any of their their portable gamma spectrometers. That's the point. So how would they measure them? And where else? And who would know? The thing. So Ali Al-Qubaisi in 2006, after the Lebanon War, Professor Al-Qubaisi got in touch with me, and he said that there's a bomb crater in Qiyam, south of Lebanon, and it's radioactive. He didn't have a spectrometer, but he went with a Geiger counter. And he said, I waved the Geiger counter over the crater, and it gave 10 times background. And so I said, well, there's got to be something there. And so we've got to go and find it. So I asked my friend Di Williams to go out there. And so he flew out there and met Kabasi, and they took some samples and they measured the radiation, which by that time had gone down to about half that level. So it started off at 10 times. By that time, it was down to about 5 times, as I recall. Anyway, it went down over a period of time. And so they brought some samples back, or Di brought some samples back. I had them tested in 2 different laboratories by 2 different methods. So the first method was alpha spectrometry, which was done by a friend of mine in North Wales who had a big laboratory in Bangor, a big radiation measuring laboratory. He did alpha spectrometry. He said, yeah, enriched. And then I also sent them to Harwell, that by that time I was working with, and had them measured by inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. And they said, yes, enriched. And both of their different methods gave pretty much the same answer, about 112, 116. And so he went out. So then there was a big fuss about all of this. And the UN said they were going to send somebody to check it all out. And they sent a team of people. The Greenpeace sent some guy called Hank van der Keur from Netherlands. And he said he couldn't find anything. And by the time the UN came and Di went out there the second time we were going to take joint samples. So he split some samples. One went to the UN, UNEP, and the other we brought back. And we still found enriched uranium, but UNEP said that they didn't find enriched uranium. But I don't trust UNEP at all. I mean, UNEP originally said when we went to Kosovo that there was no depleted uranium there. They sent a team out there and they said, oh, well, they didn't find any depleted uranium. Well, I found depleted uranium. And so I went out on the television, on Japanese television, because they paid for me to go out there, Nippon TV. And so we were the first people to show that the US were using depleted uranium weapons in Kosovo.
I suppose you're up against this constant problem is that, a bit like, there's various stories. I'm thinking immediately about MH370, the plane that disappeared. Well, if the military have been involved in taking it, then there's a massive cover-up, and even all the civil society groups that are supposed to oversee this stuff are just told to keep their mouths shut.
Yes, well, I mean, I thought quite a lot about whether I should say anything about this business of neutron bombs, because I've got this sort of reputation which has been spun by whoever it is that runs the internet, Google and so on, of being some kind of mad person. But in the end, and so obviously, if I'm going to come out and I say they've been using neutron bombs, the Israelis have been like neutron bombs, they're going to say, well, this is just total crazy Busby and all his crazy conspiracy theories. But my question to them is that, well, you have to explain why there's this paper in Nature that shows highly enriched uranium in all of the samples they measured in Gaza. And that isn't Busby. That's, three researchers who measured this stuff, and they give you the answers and all the statistics are there and all the rest of it. So you explain where the enriched uranium came from, because the only possible place it could come from is something to do with nuclear material, man-made nuclear material. And so you could say, and in fact, my friend Di has suggested that what they do is they drop enriched uranium on the ground in order to compensate for the depleted uranium that they've been using, so that it comes out normal and nobody can measure it. But to be honest, I think that's absurd. I mean, this is like trying to using enriched uranium by dropping it on people is like trying to kill people by dropping diamonds on them. It's very expensive stuff.
Enriched uranium is, but what about the samples? When you're going around collecting samples, do you go around equipped with a Geiger counter, finding a hot spot and taking that piece of soil, or is it just random?
You have to, if you're going to look for this stuff on the ground, you have to use a scintillation counter, because you have to look for the beta radiation from the depleted uranium. You get the daughters, the thorium and the protoactinium, are both beta emitters. So you look for beta. Beta has a range in air of about 1 meter. And so what you do is you trail this scintillation counter about 6 inches above the ground, and suddenly it goes mad. And then you look to see on the ground what's there, and you take a sample. You're not likely to find it with a Geiger counter because they're very, very, unless you've got pure uranium, the amount of gamma radiation coming off it is not so great. Of course, you've got pure radiation. There's a lot of gamma coming off it from the thorium-234 and the protoactinium-234 gammas. The protoactinium-234 gamma is a particularly powerful one. It's 1,000 keV. It's 1 MeV decay. There's not much of it. It's 0.7%. But still, if you've got a lump of uranium there, 0.7% of it is quite a lot of gamma. So that's what you do. So in Kosovo and in Iraq, I wondered about the place with a scintillation counter. I mean, the Irish government bought me a scintillation counter for some work that I was doing on Sellafield. They're quite expensive things, about £2,000 to get one of those. It has a very, very thin window, and when the beta particles or alpha particles hit it, they cause a little flash of light on the inside, and that's picked up by a photomultiplier and amplified. And then you get a little bleep. And in fact, the one I've got it's got a discrimination system. So you get a click, 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 click from the gammas. But if you get an alpha, it goes beep. So you get click, 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 beep, click, click, beep, beep, click, 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 beep, like that. Okay, that's the sound it makes. It's quite a cool machine. Anyway, it's in England now.
Well, what about? I mean, talking about Gaza, we have to visit this conflict that's going on at the moment. We've just had, literally today, the resumption of bombing by the Israelis. I mean, apparently, according to the BBC, the war is continuing now, but it doesn't really seem to be much about warring. It seems to be more about bombing from the air.
Yes, well, why would I mean, it seems to me that I mean, I've been looking at war strategy. I know, isn't it horrifying? Looking at Moltke and all these sort of Clausewitz and so forth. I mean, it seems to me that all you have to do if you want to destroy the Palestinians is to bomb them with materials that destroy their genetic their genetic, makeup. I mean, we know that's happened already because.
So don't the Israelis want the real estate? I mean, that's part of the deal here. Is that
yeah, of course they want they can rebuild all that stuff. That's not a problem. I mean, they can rebuild all that stuff. So they're doing both. They're smashing it flat, and they're producing and they're dropping uranium, neutron bombs on the place. I'm sure that's what they're doing. I mean, the Israelis. I used to say that the United States is a psychosis, but the Israelis are total psychosis. I mean, they have said that they see this like Saul and the Amalekites, David and the Amalekites. In fact, their neutron bomb is called David's sling. How about that? The one that they've got, their neutron bomb, they called it David's sling. Yeah? Okay. So they don't give a damn about it. They want to wipe out all these people because, as far as they're concerned, they're non-human. They're just Arabs, they're Amalekites. They're the devil. They're going to be wiped out, all of them. That's what they want to do. And everybody stands by and watches it happen. In particular, the Americans stand by and watch it happen. Or even, as I understand lately from people that have contacted me, is that they're increasing their supply of weapons to Israel to try and effect this destruction of the Palestinians in Gaza and drive them out. So they all go and live in Egypt, or they live in the desert, or they live in the sea.
How can they actually get out?
Well, they can. I mean, from time to time, the various ones do get out, but the problem is there's nowhere for them to go. I mean, the Egyptians don't want them. So the answer is to destroy them. The answer is to destroy them, and that's what they're doing. That's their plan.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would be very, skeptical about your saying that they're going to use neutron weapons, even if there is some evidence of that, because you'd be left with a kind of radiation wasteland, and then those beautiful shores along there, the Israelis would be looking at that real estate to redevelop it, to sell it, kind of classic redevelopment, disaster capitalism.
Tony, let's get one thing absolutely straight. A neutron bomb does not leave any nuclear waste, okay? It just leaves behind uranium particles, that's all. And uranium particles are not good, but they're not nuclear waste. They don't have the same properties as if they like Hiroshima, where the place was sort of radioactive with strontium-90 and cesium-137 and all these fission products. And in any case, the problem is that, and this is why I do this attack on the radiation risk model, is that they swallow all this radiation risk model. They think that the radiation risk model is correct. They don't think uranium causes any effects. Never mind about the neutrons. Of course, they know the neutrons cause effects, but once the neutron bomb has gone bang and destroyed the genetic material of the people that are there, that's it. There's no downstream effect except there's some uranium particles. But they don't think uranium particles are harmful. They really don't. Their model said they're not harmful. The generals say they're not harmful, and nobody in the West believes that they're harmful. You have the Royal Society saying they're safe. They have all these bogus, dishonest spin doctor scientists who tell the government what they want to hear, and so they give uranium weapons away to Ukraine. And when someone complains about them, and when Putin complains about them, they say, "Oh, it's just nonsense. They're perfectly harmless, no problem. I would eat them for breakfast," and all this stuff. It's just complete smoke and mirrors, really.
I mean, it is useful to be talking about nuclear weapons. I noticed just a couple of days ago, the United Nations has warned that nuclear war is at its highest risk since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is, reported in some countries, and Pakistan reported it, not being reported on the BBC News. But as we're discussing all this, we're being told by the UN this is more likely than any time since Nagasaki and Hiroshima. There's this big meeting going on down in the Middle East, funnily enough, in Dubai. It's called
COP28.
COP28, exactly. Yeah. So with King Charles, David Cameron, amazingly sort of resurrected from the grave, and Rishi Sunak all vying to get down there first in their private jets. Well,
I mean, let's not get started on global warming. As far as I'm concerned, the whole media, the whole of the sort of, if you like, the central gravity of understanding of the situation is wrong. That's that's my position on all of this. That the dangers are coming from areas which are not talked about very much. And if there's one message I want to get out in your talk, in this interview that we have now, is that we already are in a nuclear war. We have been in a sort of nuclear war since the 60s. And the increase in cancer in the world, and the increase in congenital malformations, and the decrease in fertility, and and the loss of populations, the loss of fish populations and bird populations and insect populations, and more or less the entire shambles that we're in at the moment on spaceship Earth, is something which is a consequence primarily of the release of radioactivity to the environment. And what we see now is the use of the neutron bomb, which for many years was believed to be the worst and most terrible weapon ever invented by anybody. And now it's being used. So that's my message to the planet, is that we have evidence that it's being used, and that evidence is in the uranium enrichment in areas where bombs have been used, which produce these big black clouds and huge explosions. And then, kill people mysteriously. And later on, then they have this downstream effect of cancer and congenital malformation and so on. So this is what we have to get out. We have to get out the fact that they're using in Gaza, and they have used in Gaza since 2009, the neutron bomb, which everybody knows that they have.